There's one thing that I disagree with Kiyosaki on, and is that your primary house is not an asset, and it certainly is. It has been for us for years.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the Gentle Art of Crushing It show, where we focus on learning and sharing with our listeners all there is to know about how to create success in our lives. This show stands on the shoulders of giants. Our mission is to empower and inspire our listeners to create the life of their dreams whilst having a blast in the process. Let's celebrate life together. Welcome to the show.
All right, welcome back to the Gentle Art of Crushing It Passive Investing Edition podcast. My name is Randy Smith, and I will be your host today. And we've got a really unique and interesting guest with us today, Jay Helms. Jay, welcome to the show.
Randy, thanks for having me. Really do appreciate it. Unique and interesting. That is not two words that have been often described to me, at least in front of my face. Usually behind closed doors where they don't want me to hear. I don't know.
Well, I think you definitely have a unique path and certainly interesting background that you shared with me up to this point. So I look forward to getting into it. So Jay is the co-founder of the W-2 Capitalist. And I'm wondering, Jay, just jumping right in, can you kind of walk us through a little bit about your background and kind of how you found the passive investing space?
Yeah. And I will say this is something we didn't talk about, and talking about catching people off guard. Probably the most unique thing about me is I met my wife when we were contestants on a reality TV show about 15 years ago. We'll talk about that some other time, but that's the most unique thing about me. But how I got into the limited partnership space is we had started investing and like most investors, found Rich Dad Poor Dad, got our feet wet with single family. Within that same year, probably the next year, got a small multifamily, got a couple of small multifamilies after that. Then we syndicated, we did a general partnership. I was a GP on a 42 unit, and I'd got enough. I was hungry. Like I wanted to do more. I wanted to do more deals. And then I started surrounding myself with these bigger operators. And I was like, if I want to get in that space, I feel like I can invest with them. I've known them for a while. I want to invest with them. I can learn just sitting back from an LP standpoint about what all this whole passive investing thing is, right? And for a long time there, I struggle with using the word passive because nothing's ever like completely passive. There's a degree, there's a ratio, there's a scale of 0 to 10 or whatever you want to call it. And I did. I started investing with some folks, and on the LP side, I love. It's about as passive as you can get, right? I love that monthly report coming into my inbox. It shows me what had happened that month, and then I go to my bank account to verify that check showed up. And at the end of that marriage or that project or whatever, then where the big kicker comes from is the equity at the end, the equity multiplier, which is huge, right? So I think that's where multifamily and being a limited partner in the multifamily space, when it's operated correctly, that equity multiplier that typically comes at the end sets it apart from all the other investing that we've done in the past.
Are you interested in real estate investing but don't know where to get started or think you don't have the time or money? Are you stuck in your W-2 because the golden handcuffs make it hard to walk away? If this sounds like you, check out impactequity.net and schedule some time to talk with the founder, Randy Smith. Randy went from massive income to leaving his W-2 through passive income, and he can help you do the same. www.impactequity.net.
Yeah, interesting. So you were a traditional W-2 person, and then at some point you started buying real estate. I'm curious. Yeah. You mentioned the little purple book. Was that really kind of your first intro into this space, or were some seeds planted along the way, or what did that look like for you?
No, that was really it. The and what led me to Google how do people get rich, or how do people get wealthy, and then ended up landing on Rich Dad Poor Dad. The company I was a principal at, I was employee number 5. It's an IT company, right? So I'm a propeller head. At least I started out that way. Then I eventually got into sales, and I ran a sales team for we were we did cybersecurity was our main kind of bread and butter, but we were the number two partner for Microsoft in North America, so it was a pretty big outfit. And so what led me to actually even begin on this real estate investing journey is that company I was a principal at. We had grown it to a certain level. I think we were up to 30 something employees doing about 6 million in revenue. And it was sold to a much bigger company that, that acquisition did not go well whatsoever. And it was a trifecta of things. I was, recently been married. I've been married for about, 4 months. The acquisition happened. Oh no, my wife's going to kill me if I get this timeline wrong. We were married for about 4 months, found out we were pregnant with our first kid, and then the acquisition happened. Right. So there was this trifecta of things, and the acquisition, I mean, it was bad. I was going to work every day or logging in because I was remote at the time, thinking about, is today the day that I'm going to get laid off? Right. Am I going to get fired? Because it was just going so horrible. And so that led me to, I'm done with W-2. I'm not doing this anymore. I got to figure out a way out. And so we started down the real estate investing avenue. Right. Didn't think we were going to own own rentals. I thought, man, let's try wholesaling. If you don't have money, that's where you start. Right. Quickly found out that wholesaling does not fit my personality. I don't like talking to people I don't know. I especially don't like asking them for money, or to some of their property at a huge discount. Like, this was 6 or 7 years ago. Oh no. 8 years. No, holy crap. I'm getting old. A long time ago. 9 years ago. 9 years ago was when this all kind of went down. And, but we eventually kind of broke our seal with a single family. We had the best tenant. We self-managed, and we're like, all right, how do we do this again? Like if I can get to 15 doors, I can punch my exit from the W-2. Right.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how much were you making cash flow on that first deal?
We actually paid for that one in cash. So there was no mortgage on it. And so we were making $350 a month.
$350 for,
yeah.
Wow. Okay.
For one. Yeah.
And where was it?
It was in Pensacola, Florida.
No kidding. Okay. So there are, wow, that's really cheap.
It was really, it was really good. Yeah.
Okay. So you do the math, whatever income target you had, divided by 350. And that was kind of where you came up with the 15 from. Okay. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. Okay. So that first deal, and where were you living at the time when you did that? Were you living in the area, or?
Yeah, we were in Pensacola.
You were. Okay. So you bought one local, you're making $350 a month. And like a lot of people, you start doing the math to think, like, what is the calculation to find freedom? Right. Okay.
We'll be in there in no time. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So like fast forward a couple of years, you had 15, you retired, and everything was perfect. Right.
Perfect. According to plan. Yeah. No, so fast forward a few years, we had grown our portfolio. We topped out our portfolio somewhere around 350 units. Right.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And so that was a combination of general partnership, limited partnership, and whatnot. And I laugh now when I see people post, I grew my portfolio to thousands of units or 1 million units, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but how much percentage did you, because when we did the math on ours, it came out to be about 15 doors is what we had, And so I laugh at that, and also laugh at assets under management. I think that's funny when people put that. Anyway, nonetheless, we had done that. I would like to say the acquisition had smoothed off, but it didn't, because that bigger company that bought us was bought by an even bigger company. And so here we go again for round 2 of that. I eventually left to work for the cybersecurity company I was talking about. Worked there for about a year, and then COVID happened, and they took the opportunity to slim up their books, and then eventually they sold their company. I was long gone, but they sold their company to another one. And we had a soft landing from the W-2 to the real world, and since then I was like, man, how are we going to get qualified for a loan? I didn't know what I didn't know, right? I had that security blanket of a W-2 job and the ease of walking into a bank and getting a loan because I would be the guarantor, right? Because of that W-2 income and whatnot. Like, how are we ever going to get a loan for another property? Well, a year later, I partnered with some guys, me and so I'm the guarantor on the loan, and I'm also the biggest or highest investor into the property, and so it's no problem, right? It's a 16 unit apartment complex in a very small town called Atmore, Alabama. You've probably never heard of it, but I love tertiary markets because the competitors are not there, and that's where I grew up. I know tertiary markets, especially in the Southeast.
Let's do this. You actually covered like probably 6 different topics that I think we could dig into with this audience that I think could really bring some value here. So you mentioned that people will present themselves as experts because they have X amount of doors or assets under management. So in an effort to help educate the audience and help them not get burned or be delusioned into thinking these guys are experts, talk about that a little bit if you can.
Yeah. So, when you think about a syndication, right? So someone who's raising money, there's a general partner who's raising money for a 400 unit apartment complex, right? A lot of times general partners don't even have money invested into the deal. They're not even an LP themselves. And so they may brag about, hey, I've got 400 units, right? Or no, you don't have 400 units. Like how much of that percentage of the GP do you actually own into the deal, right? And it those vary, percentage wise varies. So I think it's funny when I see folks bragging about that on social media. I now mark it up as, man, that's a very immature investor. You know what I mean? Like, and the same thing with assets under management. It's, I don't know, I guess some folks get off on that and it's an ego boost to them to say, I've got 100 million in assets under management. I don't, personally, I don't care how many assets under management you have. What I care about, what's the return to your shareholders on those assets under management, like, or your partners, I should say. And let's brag about those numbers, but most of the time they can't, right? Because they're so focused on getting the next deal, because that's how they actually live their life, is they get that, not only that asset management fee, but they get the syndication fee, right? For finding the deal and raising the money for closing. So they're focused on those fees when I think you should be focused on the returns for your partners. I do. So when I see somebody bragging about either one of those things, all right, you're an immature investor. I'm not going to.
No, I agree.
I'm done.
Thank you. Like I've always talked, I've been of the same boat about the number of doors, because like I just went over to my Excel sheet and I'm personally invested in 2,400 doors.
Yeah.
And that doesn't even include the funds that I'm invested in, which is probably 10,000 doors, right? But at the end of the day, what I can share is I'm personally involved in X amount of deals.
Yeah.
If I really want to open up my skirt, I can say I have this much invested in the space, and this is how much my monthly passive income is.
Yeah.
Those are like the true metrics, I think, in the space. Like, am I truly free to leave my job or become work optional? Or do I just have, and then you find folks that will say they're in 75 different deals, but they're only putting $5,000 per deal in it.
1% of the deal. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so I've been there too. I mean, starting out trying to grow or prove my worth in the space. It was one of those things where, hey, I'd brag about the number of doors, but now I think it's funny and immature. Right. And it was definitely was. So
yeah. Well, no, and I think that's good to bring up, though, for the new investor, not to be persuaded in doing something thinking that they're an expert when really it just means something else. Like, how many actual deals have you been involved? What has your involvement been in those deals? And percent ownership is a really important one to ask as well if people are telling those type of numbers. So you mentioned later that, and this is kind of similar to me, you got laid off at some point because in corporate
May of
America, we all
2020.
think May of 2020. I'm a May of 2022
Okay.
alum myself. So you mentioned a soft landing. So
Yep.
talk to me about that a little bit, because that I suspect was a soft landing is better than a hard landing. I suspect if you could talk through
Yeah.
that a little bit.
Yeah. So you're in that window, and it does get better if you're feeling this the same way I did. But there's a lot of talk about financial freedom right in this space, but nobody really talks about once you make the leap, either you're pushed like you and I've been pushed, or you take the jump on your own. There's a lot of stress and anxiety that comes with not having that W-2 paycheck, right? And so there's a lot of different emotions. And I was talking to somebody earlier about this, and they're like, yeah, it's kind of like when you have kids for the first time. Like, you have kids, you don't know about becoming a father. Like, you don't know what's going on, but then you have one and you're like, yeah, just make sure they stay alive, and that's okay, And so then you have another, and you have another. And so eventually, as time goes on, you worry less about what, the horror stories you tell yourself, right? And you focus on thriving instead of just surviving, kind of thing. And so I was in that space, right? And so I was in that area to where, I got the call from my boss, and I took a minute to take a deep breath. It was totally unexpected. The sales team that I ran, we had exceeded quota 4 out of the last 6 months. COVID was shutting everything down. Along with cybersecurity, we sold remote productivity software like Microsoft Office 365. Why wouldn't we be in a best place to just own the market? And so totally unexpected. So, but about 10% of our company was laid off. I was one of them. And a lot of folks call me, say, hey, I heard you got the axe. I did too. What are you going to do? And I was like, I don't think I'm going back to the W-2 world. I just don't think like, what? How are you able to do that? And they knew that I was investing on the side. I guess they just didn't know how much. And I said, we've got, so here's what we were essentially doing is we were living off of my salary. And then all of our investment money was going back into buying more properties, right? So we weren't living above our means or whatnot. If you ask my wife, she said, no, we were living below our means because of you. And so, but we have a good time. Where was I going with that? Oh, so the soft landing came with me realizing and sitting down and saying, okay, we've got to take a pause. Let's go on financial lockdown. Okay. Let's track it. We'd gotten away from like keeping up with a budget and what we were spending and everything. And I was like, we got to get back to that. Let's see how things are going to respond. And after about 6 months of that, I got a little bit relief. Okay. We're not going to die. We're not going to go into foreclosure or anything like that. We're not going to be on bankrupt, living in a cardboard box or having to move in with the parents. We're not there. And so, but that was it, and probably the saving grace. One of the things that we did, I mentioned that we have the Airbnb, as well. For the last couple of years leading up to the layoff, my wife and we had talked about, how do we travel more? We want our kids to be able to travel and whatnot. And we had 3 at the time. They were 5, 3, and 1 when I got laid off. Somewhat feel sorry for my boss for having to make that call because he knew but somewhat I don't. And so, but when he called me that morning and told me the news, hey man, we're letting you go. Took a deep breath, composed myself, walked in, told my wife, said, hey, that's my boss. Oh, what do you want? Well, I'm no longer employed. And, instantly she just said, great, now we can travel like we want to. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. We just took a huge financial hit. We live off our my salary, blah, blah, blah. And so it took me a while to warm up to this idea, but she finally planted the seed of, hey, we can travel. Let's convert our house to a B&B. And then we'll we'll just be traveling while it's booked, And I'm like, no, we're not doing that. And so eventually I warmed up to the idea because she started showing me the financials around it. Right. And, there's one thing that I disagree with Kiyosaki on, and is that your primary house is not an asset. And it certainly is. It has been for us for years. So for about 2 years now, we've lived a nomadic lifestyle. We've been what we consider home for about 4 months of the last 2 years, or I should say about 6 months now. And the rest of the time it's been a B&B. For 6 months, we're coming up, it's a year and a half of it being on the B&B site, and it's grossed a little over 100,000 for us. Yeah. And so our carrying cost, from soup to nuts, maintenance, repairs, everything except for vacancy, is about 30 something thousand for the year. So, so it pays for itself. It pays for us to travel. And it's incredible. And so to do the math on that, so we get about $500 a night for our house. We don't stay in $500 accommodations a night. We're like $100-$200 a night max, kind of accommodations. And we hop from B&Bs to hotels, and depending on what we're doing, we did have an RV we lived in for about 6 months there. And we'd still have it if it didn't have frame issues that we had to basically give it away after we bought it. But
Got it.
Anyway, story for another time.
Yeah. So, okay. So again, similar story to mine. It sounds like where you are a high income W-2 guy, you get the layoff. All of the friends are amazed because you're not scared like everybody else is, because you've been investing in real estate. So, for our audience, there are folks that, maybe the goal is to leave the W-2, but maybe the goal is just to have a little more freedom, have work optional be a reality for you, or maybe just have the ability to change jobs if you like and do something that you enjoy even more. So, the goal here is not always like, I've got to quit my job and I never want to go back to corporate America, but it is a real option if you start to invest either passively or somewhat passively in real estate on the side. So very, very good. Now, you mentioned a little bit that you like tertiary markets.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that a little bit too? Because my strategy is I generally invest with big operators with lots of full cycle deals, kind of, middle of the fairway, singles and doubles type of thing. So talk to us about tertiary markets, because it can get a little squirrely if you don't know the markets well, I think.
It definitely can. And, the biggest thing about tertiary markets is building a team there that can take care of your property, right? We don't live in a tertiary market. Well, maybe we do. I don't know. It's a small town, but we don't own any properties here. And I say live, what we call home, right? For a few months out of the year. But with the tertiary markets, that's the biggest thing, is you don't necessarily have the resources. But, I look at, because we would make offer after offer, these bigger deals or even mid-size deals. And when I say mid-size, 50 to 100 units, to me, big is above 100, right? That 127 unit or 172 units where, you can justify having a full-time employee on site. But we were looking at these things and, not saying I don't like to compete, but I have certain investing criteria that I know when I hit that in my underwriting, it's going to be a home run deal for me and my partners, right? But I kept running into these primary and secondary markets where folks either they have a different investing criteria where they don't care about cash flow as much, or they don't care about this metric. And so they make higher offers that absolutely make no sense when I put that into my underwriting, or they're playing by a different set of rules. And what I mean by that is they come in with, millions of 1031 exchange money, and they could care less about what cash flow does for the next several years, because regardless, they've got the reserves to carry that and they're okay with it. But what they can't do is take that tax hit on the millions that they're bringing in from a 1031 exchange. So they don't really care if they lose out on cash flow or just break even. But my partners, no, we don't invest in that. We invest for cash flow plus an equity multiple. Right. And some people don't. And some people, and that's okay. At first, it used to bother me, like how they do it. So, but really just comes down to that's what they invest for and that's what they're looking for. We're not in that position yet. Right. And so, where we found some success is in some of these tertiary markets where these folks typically don't go.
Okay.
Right?
Yep. No, that's good. And it's good information to share with the audience because that is not something we often talk about. So
yeah.
Now you mentioned earlier,
and I don't, maybe you can cut that out because I don't want people competing over tertiary markets that we're in.
well, and it's funny though, like you said, the big guys aren't going to play in that space. Private equity is probably not going to play in that space. They like cookie cutter. They like down the fairway. They like predictable. They don't like small town politics, all of those types of things like you can probably thrive in. So
I can navigate them. Like I know a little bit. I mean, I grew up in small town, Northeast Alabama. So I know like I kind of feel like those are my people. You know what I mean?
You're not big city folk, right?
I'm not big city folk. And quite frankly, even from a passive investor standpoint, I don't want to be in a bunch of deals at once. Right. Mm-hmm. I'm like, it sounds like too much of a job to be in, I don't know, 20 or 30 deals at once. Like that sounds way too much of a job for me. I'm like, I don't want to do that.
Sure. Yeah, no, fair enough.
But again, so to each his own, right? So,
yep. They say two different schools of thought. It's like keeping all your eggs in one basket and watching that basket very close, or spread it around and diversify more. So definitely, and that kind of ties into the next thing. You talked about kind of the difference between vetting and criteria, both with partnerships and with deals. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think you bring a unique perspective here that I think would really add some value to the audience.
Yeah. We were talking about, in our space, a lot of folks talk about establishing your investing criteria. But if you're a limited partner looking to be a limited partner in your very first deal, you've never done a syndication or, anything like that. What do you know? and I'm not meaning this as derogatory or anything. You don't know what you don't know, right? But what do you know about a deal that you can go and contest whoever the general partner is and ask them, say, hey, explain this to me, right? And know that you're getting a correct and accurate and honest and integrity filled answer, right? Chances are nothing. Chances are you don't know anything about that. And if the syndicator is a good salesperson, right, then they may have the chance to sell you on a bad deal, right? And so that's why, I've been having a lot of conversations recently with folks who are wanting to get in this space, and they're like, I've got my investor criteria, can't find a deal, can't find partners. I was like, well, tell me about your partnership criteria. I'm like, what are you talking about? And I was like, well, so here's an example. I feel like I'm a pretty educated operator. I've done a handful of deals where I fully exited, provided great returns. But the last two syndications that I invested in, I thumbed through the offering memorandum and wired the money. Like I didn't dive into it. I didn't know the markets, but I knew the person representing them. And I trusted them enough to say, hey, here's 25,000 for this one. Here's 50,000 for this one. What else do you have in your pipeline? Because of his track record and because I've gotten to know him over the last several years. So I challenge people to think about, creating a partnership criteria, especially here at the beginning, right? I feel like the other way is if you're looking to be an LP on your first syndication and you're out there creating your investing criteria, that's important, right? Because you need to know, hey, do I want certain dollars of cash flow? Am I looking really, I don't care about cash flow. Maybe the equity multiple is more important. Do I care about being in a city where I can drive by and just look at the property or secret shop it, whatever the case is? But also you gotta create that partnership criteria, right? Like, what are you looking for in a partner? And I've had some bad stories or bad partnerships. And so my criteria has changed or evolved over the years. Right. And so I'll tell you what my partnership criteria is. And I'm not saying this is for everybody. Right. But for me, and you'll notice it's more about the person than their experience. Right. Um, first thing is I got to know you. Right. And it's not like, Randy, you and I are having this conversation today, and 6 months from now, we have a second conversation, and I check that box and say, okay, I know Randy. No, I know of Randy. We've had a couple of conversations, but I don't know Randy. But I do put like a minimum 6-month timeline on getting to know somebody before I'll invest in a deal or partner with them on any way. Because I mean, you're probably the same way. Your inbox or your messenger gets loaded with folks saying, hey, I've got a deal. You want to partner on it? Like, I don't know you. Let's get to know each other first. You can show me this deal. I can tell you if I would partner on you or not. But ultimately, let's work to create a relationship so we can partner on the next one, right? Most of the time, that's where the conversation stops, because I have enough people in my platform and whatnot that if I want a partnership, I'm on the calls with these folks 3 and 4 times a month. I get to know them. We talk about our spouses. We talk about our kids, and we open up, we get transparent. So I got to know the person for a minimum of 6 months. And really that's kind of a gut feeling, right? It can be more or less than that. The second thing is, and nothing against people who have been divorced, but if you've been divorced more than twice, it's just a flat out no. Like, and for 2 reasons. Either A, you've been divorced more than twice, you just make really bad decisions, or B, you don't know how to treat people. It's one of those two. And I'm to the point where I don't want to deal with either one of those. You know what I mean? So, and then the third thing is, it's a bonus if they have kids. And that's more of a personal thing, because a lot of times I'm looking for a venue to vent about about how awesome our kids are at times. And so those are kind of the 3 primary criteria. And then when it comes to investing, they have to show some experience in exiting profitably, right, on some deals. And so but again, that's last, right? That would be last in the deal. I'm really looking at the person, not necessarily their resume.
Yep. No, I love it. I love it. And I think those are real. These are measurable items that you can use to bring into that vetting and that interview process. And I like number 1 out of all of those, probably the most, just simply because I'm a believer that if you hang around anybody long enough, they're going to show their true self. Yep. And you're not going to get that in a 30-minute conversation, whether it's Zoom recorded or not. You're not necessarily going to get that in podcast or watching webinars. You're going to get that by hanging around those people in social settings, and regularly and consistently over time to see how people show up. And ultimately, like you said, how they show up consistently over time is how they're going to show up as business operators. And that's probably the number 1 indicator to success is, are the partners going to get along and be able to perform and play nice in their sandbox while they're doing this multi-million-dollar business plan, right?
Yeah, and that's where the married piece comes in as well, right? So if over that time frame, I will get some sort of sense of how they're treating their partner.
I love
it.
Right?
Like because when we do a deal together, now I'm the partner, right? Yep. Now am I going to be treated like they're treated?
Yeah.
I
love
it.
I don't. If you're your most sacred partnership, you're not treating well, then that's probably going to translate to your business operations.
Yeah, exactly. So,
yeah, very good. Different type of conversation than what I've had with a lot of folks. So when I let this off saying a unique and interesting individual, I hit that nail on the head. It sounds like. So
you got it.
Yeah. Well, good stuff. Well, let's, we're already at over a half an hour, but I do have a few questions that I like to ask all of our guests. So can you share a good educational resource for the first time passive investor whether it be a book or a podcast or anything that you think would be a good idea for somebody to start learning in this space?
You know, for a first time passive investor, I wouldn't necessarily say a book or a podcast. I mean, other than your show, of course, Randy. But here's what I would do along with, getting to know the operators. Right. And so the educational resource is really just a tip is once a week. And again, you're trying to be passive at this, right? Once a week, get on the phone with a new operator, right? Call Randy, and then a couple of weeks from now, call him again, and then next week, it takes 15 or 30 minutes to pick up the phone and just dial and just get to know the people that are operating. I don't even necessarily start with, tell me about the deals you've been a part of. It's, hey man, what's going on? How's the fam? How's life? How's it treating you? And then we eventually get to some business. Now, a lot of that comes from, I was born and raised in the Southeast, and that's just how we do stuff. Like I did a lot better in my sales career knowing more about my client's son's T-ball team than I did about their actual business, because that's just a way that we did business. So, my tip is just pick up the phone and dial. Just, find some operators, find some folks and when you get done talking to Randy, say, Randy, all right, who do you know that it's in the space that I need to have a conversation with? Do you mind doing an introduction? Because that's testing, right? And it's testing like if Randy turns you away, chances are probably you're not calling Randy back. You know what I mean? So you're somewhat testing that operator and saying, hey, are you willing to show me kind of what's behind the curtain a little bit? And if they're not, to me, that might be a red flag. Absolutely. It is a red flag. It's not a white. It's a red flag.
Yeah. Cause what do they say? The best deal you do is the bad deal you walk away from. Right. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, yeah. How can our audience support you? How can they find you? How can they get on the phone with you?
Yeah, well, so you can give me a call, or actually, I got to stop saying that because I don't answer my phone and I don't listen to voicemail. There was a study I recently read that 80% of voicemails go unlistened to. Huh. I think I'm what makes it higher to 80% and then closer to 60. Because I don't listen to them. Even my wife gets mad at me, like, you saw where I called. I was like, why didn't you text me? She goes, I did text you. I was like, oh. Yeah, you did. Yeah. So, but no, text me, my cell phone number, 205-249-0248. You can text me anytime. It does not matter. Okay. Because I have my phone profile where my phone is. I don't receive notifications on text messages. I eventually get to them, but I don't. Yeah.
And that kind of talks to the importance of your family and the things that you're doing, right? Yeah. Very good.
And you gotta guard your time, right? And so I try to eliminate distractions. So when I have a moment, I'll catch up on text messages, because I know there's not going to be a day, Randy, where I don't pick up my phone and look at my text messages. No doubt. Why do I need a notification going off every time somebody texts me? I don't
love it. I love it. Yeah, very good. All right. Let's see here. So the question I kind of told you about earlier, but it's one that I like. Yeah. Can you share with the audience either a recent bucket list item that you checked off your list or one you are hoping to in the near future?
Can I do both? You gave me me a heads up, so we got some time to think of it. So when we first started traveling, doing our nomadic lifestyle, we're in Panhandle of Florida. We wanted to make it to Maine. Never been to Maine, heard how great Maine was. We made it to Maine. Made it to Maine. We made stops and 4 or 5 different stops along the way, one including New York City with the kids.
Oh, nice.
They want to go back for some reason. I think it's just because of the subway.
Sure.
But we had a freaking blast doing that road trip, and there were Clark Griswold moments for sure.
I'm sure.
Definitely that. But the next, like this summer, we're planning a trip out west. Never been to Utah, Wyoming, Montana. Never seen the Grand Canyon. So that's one I'm hoping we can check off this summer. We were trying to this past summer but our plans got changed just a little bit. So
Okay. Very good. I love travel bucket list items. Definitely. That's mine as well. So I want to hit all 7 continents, and I'd love to hit all of the states in the country as well. So yeah, very cool.
Well, I know a guy who used to do work for the government on Antarctica. So when you get ready to make that plunge, he can give you some pointers.
All right.
He's also my electrician. So he's doing it's a very, you think I'm unique and interesting. You should talk to this guy.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. Well, hey, Jay, I really appreciated the time and enjoyed the time with you today. I think you brought, as I mentioned earlier, I think it was a very unique perspective, very different than most of the operators and passive investors that I've talked with in the past. So thank you so much for being on the show. I really, really appreciate you being here with us. Thank
you for having me, Randy. One last thing I want to do for everybody who's listening is to give you a copy of my book, right? And so it's very easy for you to do. Go to makeanofferbook.com. And just fill out the form there. If you want the hard copy, I'll send you a free copy of that. Or if you want the PDF, you can get that free PDF there. But it's geared towards those folks who are just on the edge of paralysis analysis that really gets all of us, right? And still affects me to some point in time. But it really encourages those new beginner investors just to take the plunge. And it's a parable form. It's a short story. It's about 2.5 hours, but at the end of every chapter, there's checklist items to kind of get you out of that funk and really start calling guys like Randy. And so you can start passive investing. That's the idea. I love it. I love it, Jay. Thank you so much. I'm going to go there right now and get it myself. So there you go. Thank you for the offer. I'll send you this copy. I'll send you this right here. I love it. I love it. Thank you. Well, very good. So to the audience, as always, I say continue the education process and continue learning about the space. We're so confident that once you make that decision to invest in your first deal, you'll continue to do so over and over and over again, and you will be one step closer to financial and time freedom that we're all shooting for. So thanks so much for being on the show again, Jay. And to our listeners, we'll look forward to having you back again shortly. Thank you. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another episode of The Gentle Art of Crushing It. It was an amazing episode. We know we sure learned a lot, and we hope you did as well. We want to take a second and thank you so much for viewing or listening to this episode. And please just know that we only ask for one favor, and that is to make this life magnificent. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.